Can you believe it? We're on season 3 already. And there's some big changes afoot here at the Stewie Toon Show. Of course, the biggest one is my new co-host, Aaron Badgley, who you may have met in season 2. I'm really excited to be able to work with Aaron and looking forward to an excellent season. We've got some great ideas for you. But today, since Aaron is such a big fan, we're going to do something special. Here are 10 things you should know about
the Beatles.
Welcome to the Stewie Toon Show. These are insights and commentary on the music and musicians that shape our lives. And now, let's go back to class with your hosts, Tony Stuart and Aaron Badgley.
Well, Aaron, we're finally here and season 3, episode 1, and I'm so glad that you joined me as co-host. I'm really looking forward.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this for the last 2 months, so yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great, and you know, it does feel like it's been a long time because we knew for a while before we announced it.
Yeah, we did.
For those of you who are listening, I mean, we've been brainstorming back and forth just about every day, and we've got a great season for you. And actually, we've got probably enough ideas for 2 seasons at least, but we'll concentrate on the first one for now. So our first 2 episodes are going to be what are called 10 things you should know about episodes. And I was talking to you about this. We're going to, do the first one on the Beatles because we're both big fans, but actually, you know a lot more about the Beatles than I do. I am quickly discovering, which is pretty cool. And the second one will be on, I think my biggest influence is Billy Joel. I am just a huge fanboy. So when we record that episode, Aaron, I got to warn you, I'm going to have a really hard time being objective there because I'm a big fanboy. So,
well, you know what? I'm having a hard time being objective when we're talking about the Fab Four, so that's fair. Fair.
yeah. Exactly. So our first 2 episodes then, 10 things you should know about the Beatles today, and next episode, 10 things you should know about Billy Joel. And then our third episode looks like we're going to have Walter DeBar in, and you know Walter better than I do, but can you tell us a little bit about Walter?
Well, Walter is an independent musician based in West Virginia, and he's remarkably talented. If you haven't heard him yet, go to Spotify, type in Walter DeBar. His music is unlike anything else you're going to hear. He's got the most remarkable vocal stylings.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
that voice is so distinct.
Oh, man. And he's a very super nice guy. And B, I'm warning everyone now, he's going to talk. And everything he says is literally gold. So enjoy.
Yeah, I can't wait till that one, actually. And our guests for this season are going to be more like co-hosts. We're going to do roundtable discussions. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Walter wants to talk about. So shall we get this thing started?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to do 10 things that we think you should know about the Beatles. And I will get it started. So the Beatles have a connection to the punk band, the Ramones. And here is the connection. When Paul McCartney used to check into hotels, he would use the pseudonym Paul Ramone. And of course, that's what inspired the punk band to take that name. And another interesting fact that I found, and this was great, Spin Magazine in 2002 named the Ramones their second best band of all time behind you know who, the Beatles. So that's a pretty interesting fact for our first one.
And and interesting to tag on to that, Tony. If you take the name Paul Ramone, and for Beatle fans who know the album by Paul McCartney called Ram, there's a song on Ram called Ram On, and that's where McCartney got Ramone. You see?
Oh, really?
Well, Ramon became one word. So there's a couple of things there. I mean, he also used the name back in the 50s when the Beatles thought they should have stage names, but later on he came up with Ramon from Ramon. So.
Yeah, and actually, for those who are listening, when he signed into the hotels, he would spell Ramon Ramon, no E, but the band later on they put the E in there. All right, I'll turn it over to you. So, what have you got for us?
Well, recently, Rolling Stone magazine has come out with their top 500 albums of all time, and up until this year, number 1 was always Sgt. Pepper.
Yes,
it's not Sgt. Pepper this year, but I'm going to talk about Sergeant Pepper for a brief second because it was a landmark album for many reasons. One of the reasons was, many reasons, but one was, and this may surprise you, Tony, it was the first album ever to give out lyrics with the album. Up until then, if you wanted to find the lyrics to an album, you were forced to buy the sheet music, if that came out. And publishers liked it that way because that would guarantee sales of sheet music for people who wanted to find out what exactly they were saying. So Pepper was the first album to have the lyrics printed on the back of the album cover and given out to fans.
Wow. And I'm going to sidetrack for a minute here about that Rolling Stone because I was just reading about that today, and
Hmm.
Marvin Gaye took over the number one spot, didn't he?
He did
I think.
indeed, yeah. In fact, the Beatles, I think the highest they placed was Revolver at 4, which
Yeah,
surprised
and
me, but
I
I'm
remember.
biased.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a lot of people thought Revolver was probably the better album of the two, but for sure, Pepper was the more influential, I think. But so, your thoughts? Where did do you know where Sergeant Pepper ended up? It was like not even top 10, was it?
Oh no, I think it was 24. I think it
Yeah,
dropped down to
huge
24.
drop.
Yeah, big drop.
I'm not sure that I agree with that, but
I
interesting.
I don't agree with it at all, and that's nothing against Marvin Gaye because I own the album What's Going On. It's a classic album, but I can think of other Motown albums, Songs of the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder,
Oh, for sure.
that had a bigger impact. I mean, maybe socially and politically the lyrics on What's Going On, but I mean, Songs in the Key of Life. That was a monumental album for those of us around in what 76 when it came out.
Yeah, incredible album. That's one of my favorites. I think we should do an episode on that album actually in the future sometime. That would be fantastic.
Well, I think I was telling you I just bought a used copy and it came with the 40. I was so happy because it had the EP in it with the 4 tracks and the booklet.
And it was in good shape too, or
Mint. It's like
that's crazy.
I know. Did anyone ever listen to this album? But hey,
Well, good for you.
their loss is my gain.
Well, exactly. All right, so I'm going to move on here with another Beatles fact that we think you should know. So, anybody out there who watched Ringo's 80th birthday special will have noticed that Ringo basically co hosted that with Joe Walsh. And there's a good reason for that. In the era of social distancing, obviously, people couldn't hang out with Ringo in person, but Joe Walsh could. And because Joe Walsh is part of Ringo's bubble. And they're brothers in law. And that just came out a few years ago. Like it wasn't real common knowledge, but Ringo married Barbara Bach and Joe Walsh married Marjorie Bach. So that's the connection there. They're related, brothers in law, and best of friends too, supposedly. So I keep seeing Joe pumping Ringo's tires all the time, and vice versa.
Well, Ringo was the first Beatle I ever saw live, and I saw him in Toronto in 1989. And Joe Walsh was part of the All Star Band. And let me tell you, those two I mean, I don't know if they were brothers in laws then, brothers in law, but it was, the two of them playing together was quite magical.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I didn't know that up until recently about them, actually, about them being related like that. But
Have you seen his wife?
yes,
She looks just like Barbara Bach. I mean, they're almost, I don't know if they're twins, but they could be.
yeah, they're so similar looking. But that's a cool little fact. All right, what do you got for us? Let's go on to the fourth thing that maybe people should know.
Well, you just brought up Ringo Starr and Joe Walsh. What about George Harrison and Mick Fleetwood? Mick Fleetwood, not Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood. So George was married. His first wife was Patty. Her sister, Jenny, was married to Mick Fleetwood for most of the 70s. So for the majority of the 1970s, George Harrison and Mick Fleetwood would be in their own bubble as well because they were brothers-in-law as well. I mean, and now, I don't know that anyone can ever kind of connected the dots to that, but that would be a fun little family reunion, wouldn't it?
That'd be great. Got the all-star band right there.
Yeah, so I mean, and Mick Fleetwood and Harrison were really good friends, and I don't know that people know that fact either. But when Mick Fleetwood did his first solo album, George Harrison played guitar on it. So there you go.
Oh, wow. And you know what, Aaron? I got good news for you because I know before the show you were mentioning you were nervous, getting behind the mic here for the show. But
Yes, I was. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the good news is I was a little nervous too, because gaining a co-host, it's fabulous, by the way. Um, but the good news is we're coming to the end of our first segment, so I think it's about time for a break. What do you think?
I can get some water.
Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to go on to our music history moment, and we've got, of course, a little history moment about the Beatles. So we'll go to that now, and we'll be right back. Today we're going back in the time machine all the way to October 5th, 1962. The Beatles' debut single, Love Me Do, was released in the UK on this date. The song was written back in 1959 by Paul McCartney, with John Lennon contributing the middle eight. It spent 26 weeks on the chart and peaked at number 17. According to Beatles producer George Martin, the day that Love Me Do was released was the day that the world changed forever. And now, let's get back to the show. And we're back from the music history moment. And Aaron, you had mentioned during break that you wanted to add some things to that about Love Me Do. So go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add that did you know there's two versions of Love Me Do?
I did not.
So the first version was recorded September 4th, 1962, and featured Ringo on drums, keeping in mind that Ringo had just joined the Beatles at this point. George Martin wasn't entirely happy with that take for whatever reason, so a week later, he hired a session guy named Andy White, who played the drums on Love Me Do. Ringo played tambourine. Now here's where
Oh,
it gets really confusing. The version with Ringo on drums came out in only two places in the world. The first pressing of the single in England, and it came out on the first pressing of the single in Canada in
oh, wow.
1963. 170 copies were sold in Canada. I have one, just saying. So yeah, so Love Me Do, the one you hear most on the radio and the one you have in your collection, I guarantee you has Andy White on drums. And as a bit of a joke, in 1998, Ringo did an album called Vertical Man, where he redid Love Me Do with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. And Ringo played the drums.
Oh, so he finally got to play the drums on that track. Now, I'm assuming on the Canadian pressing, then Andy White didn't get credit for that, did he? Like it wasn't
No,
actually listed? No.
no, no. And you know what, folks, go and check your record collections, because if you can find Love Me Do on Canadian Capitol Records, it's one of the rarest Beatle records you're going to find. So,
All right, and we're gonna move on to another four facts about the Beatles that we think you should know before we introduce our second segment of the show. And this one, I've always read and you hear interviews from guys when rock and roll first became a thing, and most people, in all honesty, picked up a guitar because they realized they could impress girls, and that seems to be a pretty common thread. And Paul McCartney was no different. And this is a little story about Michelle. So supposedly, Michelle was inspired by Paul's attempts to pick up girls at parties. From what I was reading, he was very shy, but he figured out that if he sat in the corner and pulled his guitar out and kind of sang even fake French lyrics, he started, getting noticed by the girls. And I find it hard to believe that Paul was shy, but you never know. And but he started to get the attention of girls. And John Lennon said to him, you should write a song the way you do that thing in the corner. You should write some kind of French song. And so that's where Michelle was born.
I'm just trying to picture. I'm trying to picture Paul McCartney having a hard time talking to anybody. Like, forget just
I
girls.
am too. I am too. But
I
that's a
mean,
great little story.
isn't that fantastic? And
Yeah.
you're and the French in that song, I think, is kind of very basic French, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Super basic. Like,
Well, but yeah, I still think it's a great little story. It's fantastic to picture Paul McCartney being too shy to approach anybody. But hey,
oh,
people
yeah.
change, I guess.
Same here. Yeah, for sure. All right. What do you got for
Well,
your
so
next one?
I mentioned that Ringo didn't play drums on "Love Me Do." I got a question for you, Tony.
Yes.
Do you know the only Beatles song where not one Beatle plays an instrument?
Well, I think I do, but I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to let you announce that because I can guess because I can hear it in my head and I can hear the orchestra. That's a huge hint to the audience, by the way. So,
It's Eleanor Rigby. Was that what you were going to say?
yes.
Now, the interesting fact about Eleanor Rigby is that they sing on the song, of course, Paul's lead and George and John doing backing. Do you know the violins in that song? You know, the very distinct violins of Eleanor Rigby. Do you know what the inspiration was behind that?
I don't. No. So what was that?
Psycho,
Oh, really?
the movie Psycho. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, but McCartney liked the sound of the piercing violins in the movie Psycho. Bernard Herrmann, who wrote that,
Hmm.
and George Martin transferred it into a Beatles song, which I always found Eleanor Rigby slightly creepy, and I wonder if that's why.
Yeah, it could be, On a side note, I actually read the novel, the original novel last year, Psycho.
Did
Have
you
you ever?
really?
Yes, and it is not a well-written novel. I mean, the
Really?
movie yeah, the movie was far, far better than the novel was.
I
It's r
I've never read the novel.
it
Really?
yeah, it reads like a high school English class project, like, it's just not well written at all, but, obviously, there was a kernel there that, Hitchcock thought would make a great movie, so I had a question for you about Eleanor Rigby. So the name Eleanor Rigby was that based on the tombstone somewhere? That like, do you know that?
So there's the story that McCartney always gave was that he got the word Eleanor from Eleanor Braun, who was in Help with them. If you remember the movie Help, Eleanor Braun was
Yeah.
the woman, the actress. Rigby, he said, came from a name of a store in London, Rigby Antiques, which does exist or did exist in '66. But I wonder because John and Paul used to hang out in that cemetery, and I don't. I'm curious if maybe, it's subconsciously or something was there that twigged because the original. You know what the original it wasn't Eleanor Rigby, but in the song it's Father Mackenzie.
Hmm.
Originally it was going to be Father McCartney,
Oh.
and John said, "Oh, I don't think that's a good idea, Paul." So changed it to Father Mackenzie. But I don't know. There is that famous tombstone, right?
Yeah. So I've always wondered about that.
Well,
Well, you know what? That's something that we can find out and maybe let listeners know on a
but,
future show.
but you've seen the Beatles anthology, right?
Yes.
Do you remember that part where they're talking about meeting Elvis?
Hmm.
And George has one memory. He goes, "Well, I think we came in and Elvis was sitting there." And then Ringo says, "Well, no, I think he came in and we were sitting." And they all had different memories of meeting Elvis. Memories do funny things, I guess, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, that would be an interesting thing to dig a little more about.
Absolutely.
So, so I've got one here. You were talking about the only song that none of the Beatles played on. But for our listeners here now, the only person to get a featured credit on a Beatles song, and I think you know this one, but that is Billy Preston, the keyboard player, and he got in April 1969 he got credit for his work on Get Back because that is such an important keyboard part. So it's credited to the Beatles with Billy Preston. And I love Billy Preston's music. I'm a big fan.
Me too.
Uh, and in fact, one of my go-to videos that I like to watch just to feel good is from the concert for George back in November 2002 after George Harrison passed away. Um, his version, Billy Preston singing "My Sweet Lord." Have you seen that?
Oh, several times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I watch that one all the time. I mean, I just find that it's just a feel good track, and Danny Harrison, his son. I mean, my gosh, there's no doubt who his father is, and and just seeing that the sheer joy on Eric Clapton's face too. That it's just a fabulous track, and Billy Preston. Um, does such justice to that song. Just unbelievable. So anybody who's listening, look that up. It's Billy Preston singing "My Sweet Lord" in the concert for George from November 2002. What a fantastic show that was.
Preston always, he just had such a spiritual happiness about him when you watch him live. I mean, I agree with you. The My Sweet Lord is brilliant, and any clip of him is just. I wish I actually did see him live. So, but I
Oh,
wish
did
I'd
you?
seen him. He was part of the Ringo Starr All Star band, but I love Billy Preston. So I'm with you on this one, 100%.
Now, didn't one of the Beatles want to make Preston a full time member? Was that? Did I read
George,
that?
yeah,
George did, eh?
mm-hmm, yeah.
And
John nixed that. John said
yeah,
no.
that's what I thought. Yeah, that's too
Yeah,
bad. That would have been interesting for sure.
but he signed and did 2 albums on Apple, the Beatles record company,
Okay.
which are, what, if you can seek them out, find them, folks, because they're quite good.
Yeah, Billy Preston was amazing. All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to you, and we're gonna get another fact here. Let's find out what you got.
People find this kind of surprising in this day and age, and I'm going to backtrack a bit. In the 60s, there was mono recordings and stereo, mono record stereo. Mono meaning it's just coming out of one speaker, and stereo meaning two speakers. We all know stereo these days because we have the headphones on. But the Beatles spent more time mixing Sgt. Pepper and the White Album for mono than they did in stereo. And in fact, they didn't even turn up for the mix of one of those two. I think it was the White Album. No one turned up for the stereo mix of that album. They wanted to mix it for mono. And if you can go out there and find the mono versions of both of those albums and compare them, they're vastly different, and in my own humble opinion, better.
Yeah, especially if they were originally intended for mono.
Yeah.
But it's hard to imagine an album like Pepper being done in mono.
It's a weird one. And when you listen to it in monotone, you're going to hear stuff that you've never heard in the stereo version. I'll just leave it at that. There's a Harrison's guitar work in the reprise.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
worth digging it up.
Wow. Well, you know what? I think this is a fantastic time to take our second break. What do you think? So we're going to talk about some famous birthdays today. So let's take our second break, and we'll be right back. Well, today we're celebrating four notable musical birthdays. Richard Street was born in 1942. Street was a member of the Temptations and had a #1 hit with Just My Imagination in 1971. Steve Miller was born in 1943. Of course, we remember him for his #1 hit, The Joker. Brian Johnson of AC/DC was born in 1947. He joined the band in 1980 and they tore up the charts with Back in Black. That album has sold at least 49 million copies. And finally, Bob Geldof of Live Aid fame was born in 1951. I've got to tell you, for those who don't know how podcasts are recorded, because we're pandemic here, Aaron and I have only actually met over Zoom. I had you on twice during season 2. We've talked a lot by Zoom meetings and stuff, but we've never met in person. So I'm looking forward to that. And we found out that each of us has relatives who live close to the other one. So I mean, you live 5 minutes from my brother. So next time I'm there, we'll go for coffee. And you've got a brother in Kempville, you said, which
I do,
is
yeah.
yeah, half an hour from me, so that's perfect. But the behind the scenes here, for those who don't know, I'm looking at a split screen, and I've got Zoom on one side for the video, so Aaron and I can see each other, and we're not tripping over each other. And and we've got our mics muted in Zoom, and then we're using something called Zencaster on the other side for the audio. So it's pretty neat looking at a split screen, and it seems to be working well, Aaron. I like this format.
I do too, and I do look forward to meeting you in person one day. That would be awfully nice.
Yes, it would be great. All right, so I have a kind of a creepy connection or fact about the Beatles, and this one is Charles Manson. He had a connection to the Beatles. And this one I always find so disturbing to read about, the whole, because of the whole Sharon Tate killings and the killing. And so Charles Manson was convinced that Helter Skelter had subliminal messaging. And that song led him to encourage his followers to commit the murder of Sharon Tate and all the other occupants of that house. But he, supposedly pored over the White Album backwards and forwards, and he was convinced that there was subliminal messaging in there, and he was also convinced, that it was encouraging him to start a race war. And in fact, at the scene of the crime, I mean, they had written "Helter Skelter" at the scene of the crime, amongst other things. But it was a horrific tragedy what happened to Sharon Tate and the other people in that house. But that connection to the Beatles, and I know, reading interviews with members of the Beatles. I mean, they were greatly disturbed by that as well, because they certainly didn't want to be associated with that type of thing. But yeah, there's a connection there between Charles Manson and the Beatles.
I always liked, I don't know if you know the album by U2, Rattle and Hum,
Yes.
but they cover Helter Skelter, and they do a live version. And what I love what Bono says at the beginning, which is, this song was stolen by Charles Manson. Well, we're stealing it back. And I always thought that
Oh,
was a very powerful statement,
yeah,
very
for sure.
powerful.
Because what a horrific thing to have your music attached to. But that one, like I said, I don't even like reading about that or anything. But that's another fact about the Beatles. All right, and looks like you've got the final one here for today's episode. So
Well, I think maybe we should end on a happy note.
yes, I
And
think so.
yeah, that's what we should. Ringo Starr, real name is Richard Starkey. Here's a question, or people will say, well, he got his name because he wears rings, Ringo rings. Partially true. He actually got the name Ringo Starr because he loved cowboy films, and he wanted to be a country and western singer. At one point, he had applied to move to America when he was like 18, and work in America because he loved the whole American cowboy and country and western. And he thought Ringo, the song by Lauren Green, Ringo, was very country and western. And then Star came from Starkey, shortened. He added the second R because, quote, that was pretty cool.
Which
So,
totally, that sounds like a Ringo thing to do.
yes, it's totally Ringo. But so, yes, he did wear rings and all that, but really it stems from his love of country and western and American westerns. So that's kind of cool, I think.
And so there you have it, folks. Those are 10 things that we thought you should know about the Beatles. Obviously, we could do another 2, 3, 4 episodes like this. There are so many things, but
And it's hundreds of books and courses on these guys, right? So,
yeah, and maybe next season, in season 4, we could do another one of these, and 10 more things you should know about the Beatles. But we're going to be introducing a segment next week, because next week's show is not about the Beatles, it's about Billy Joel. But we're going to be having a segment because, as Aaron and I talk about, it seems like all roads lead back to the Beatles eventually, if you really look. And so we're going to have a segment next week called 6 Degrees of Beatlemania. And we're going to have some new music written by my good friend Rick Denis. And I'll have to introduce you to Rick as well,
I'd
because
like
you
to meet
guys
him.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy. And Rick and I are both, we gig together as well in the Somerset combo, but super guy and incredibly talented writer. So I'm so glad that he's doing the tunes for this podcast. So next week it'll be 6 Degrees of Beatlemania coming your way. But I thought today, this is something, some of you know this, some of you may not, but I'm also a high school band director, music teacher. And one of the things that I do quite often at the end of a class is, okay, what are your takeaways? What'd you learn today? So Aaron, what was your biggest takeaway from today's conversation?
Well, my biggest takeaway is I really enjoy doing this with you. This has been an absolute 100% pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of Beatles, I think I love the McCartney story about using, the guitar to break out of his shyness, and John encouraging to do that, kind of again for the song Michelle, which it's a classic song off Rubber Soul, and it's a great story. So that's my takeaway. That even someone is, who I hold up on such a pedestal as Paul McCartney, he gets nervous too and shy. So there you go.
Yeah, I think my takeaway was that story about Love Me Do and the 170 albums in Canada. That's a great fact. And you said you have one of those, do you?
Very quickly, I can tell you how I got it.
Yeah,
When I
let's
was
hear it.
when I was a kid, there was a family living down the street, and they went away on a vacation, and they asked me to feed their cat for a week. So I was Beatle crazy at the time, still am. And when they got back, they said, "Well, instead of us giving you money, we have some Beatle records for you." And one of them was the "Love Me Do" single. The guy says he was an older guy. And he goes, I'm not big. I don't like these guys. I never listened to this record, anyways. And Tony, it's in mint condition, and I've kept it that way since I was 8. So there you
Oh,
go.
that's a great story. And so that's our episode for today. Yeah, Aaron, I really enjoyed this as well. And I think this is going to be a great partnership. So thanks so much for agreeing to co host. Awesome to have you on the show. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. And for those listening out there, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, one of the biggest things you can do is spread the word, spread the gospel, as they say. Let your friends and family know. Share our posts on social media whenever we release a new episode, and subscribe as well. If you feel like leaving a rating or a review, that's excellent as well. So until next time, on behalf of Rick Denis and all of us here, because we're a team now, which is pretty amazing, actually. I'm so excited that it's a team now and not just a solo show. So on behalf of all of us, here we go. We practiced this too, so let's see how this goes. Ready?
Yep.
Stay safe.
Be well.
And see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Stewie Tunes Show. Follow us on social media or visit us online at stewietunes.com. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to click subscribe.